Yo, what's going on? We are back with another episode of the Unsilent Church podcast, and we got the crew up in the building this morning.
John in a different seat.
Right.
Hey, man, different seat. You know, we playing musical chairs around here. We just trying to maintain, you know what I'm saying?
Good.
Trying to stay out of trouble.
We got a wide angle shot now.
Hey, man, it's good, man, good.
We upgrading. Things are coming.
That's right.
Things are coming.
More to come.
More to come. Stay tuned. But listen, we got a episode for you all today. You know, we've talked about this kind of theme before in some ways of the industry of the church, if you will. Pastor V, go ahead and start us off, man.
Yeah. So we thought it would be good to sort of continue to explore this topic of, let's call it the business of church, the professionalization of church, the ways in which church has become a product, a corporation to run, and some of the ways that, I mean, there's things that are, I could say you can find some good aspects to it in terms of
Sure.
how we want to think about doing church better, but a lot of things that have negative effects. And so there's a couple of different news stories that came across our different streams and other things we thought would be good to kind of dialogue about.
Came across the table.
That's right. We have a little Instagram group chat that we pass different things along. And so this is from things we've always been talking about. I think we've been talking about for a while.
It's true.
That would be good to talk about here. So first one is an article that came out in Relevant magazine. And I think this is essentially the title of it, that 80% of people would go to church if someone asked them. I think it's making the point that
80%.
That most people are open to church, that church is something that if we were just willing to ask people about. So this is maybe, initially it sounds more positive, I suppose. But James, I know we were talking a little bit about before we started recording as an angle on this in terms of, 80% of people will go to church if we ask them, but maybe there's a reason why we are asking people to come to our churches.
Yeah, there are two questions. One, why aren't people inviting others to church if the claim is that 80% of people would say that they would go if asked? There's argument as to whether or not that's actually true. My question was, is church something worth inviting people to still? And again, I think the short answer would probably be, how could you ask that sort of question? But I think it's a question worth asking when you consider.
Probably depends on what church too, what kind of church.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So for instance, I was in an organization. There was a guest speaker who wrote a book on marriage, and he mentioned his age. I think he was in his 60s. And I remember after he was finished, I went to him because I sort of did the math and was like, "Yo, you were like 19, like you're like in college, like probably going to college or somewhere in that age." While all the civil rights stuff was going on, what was church? What were you doing? Like you were of age, like you knew what was going on. You could see what was going on. What was your thinking of things when, all this civil rights stuff was happening back then? And his answer was, "Oh, I left the church." And I went, "Oh, why?" He's like, "Because they wouldn't say anything about it."
Wow.
So again, I know there are conflicting conversations about what's happening in churches and, in all of that activity. But it was interesting that in an age that we now look back and romanticize, and I've said this before, we look back at that age and go, "Oh, things were done right," or MLK did things right back then. But back then, like people who were live and well, the sentiment was not the same. Otherwise, MLK wouldn't have had to say the things that he said, right? He wouldn't have written a letter from a Birmingham jail if things were just so romantic back then.
They hated him back then. To your point, King was, in that time, he was hated. And even amongst a lot of blacks, black clergy as well. Yeah. And so I wanted to say about the 80% number about inviting the church. First, I just want to say, put my cards out on the table. I do think that there is something about inviting people to church. You know what I mean? And to be very clear, we use that language of inviting to church, but the people of God are actually the church, right? The church is not necessarily a building per se, but I understand the language that people say go in the church.
Sure.
So just to be very clear, we Bible people here, you know what I'm saying? It's the people of God. However, I do think, I just talked about a little bit from my experience. I was surprised I've been surprised of me just personally inviting people to church and people actually like, oh, I'll at least come check it out. You know what I'm saying? And so I do think there is there is something to, hey, like, just come and see, just come through. You know what I'm saying? And as you come through, hopefully, obviously, you experience God. Hopefully, you build meaningful friendships and relationships and those things. Now, I'm questioning the 80%.
Why? Yeah, so,
like that's the part where I'm like, man, that seems really high. I do think there's, again, invite people. They I think a lot of our people in our circle of influence probably will probably come and check out. But 80%, I'm just like, man, that's just seems high.
Let's just give justice to the article. And
Okay.
So it's a author, church researcher, Tom Rayner. I mean, I'm familiar with that name. He's done a lot of research, et cetera.
Okay.
And so I think it's not just it's not like a web study, right? It seems
he's legit.
He's legit. And I think Lifeway Research has some interaction with this as well. Or maybe it's connected to Lifeway Research. All this to say is that the article says the majority of unchurched Americans, the title was 80%. I haven't looked at the study itself, but he's saying his research shows they're open to visiting a church, but haven't been invited. But 40% of Christians say they didn't know anyone to invite. That's part of the problem.
And his question says, why don't we?
Yeah.
That's literally the question he's asking.
And so, people pointed to prior refusals, discomfort, belief it wasn't their responsibility. The research, this was Lifeway's research. So Lifeway is a major company, right? Obviously, Lifeway.
Oh, yeah.
Also, so this is, they said a majority of unchurched Americans would also attend events like concerts, service projects, or neighborhood gatherings connected to a church. And so article's trying to make the point that we should redefine what an invitation looks like. This maybe gets into what you're saying, which is to say that maybe the first step is inviting someone to something outside of Sunday worship, maybe something that the church community is doing together. I think it's trying to make the point that like church life in general is something more people or more unchurched people might be open to if they were asked. Yeah. But part of the problem is a good number of Christians just aren't connected to people to invite, right? So this is a more positive way of looking at it. And I think we should be encouraged by that. If I was to attach it to what you're saying, James, I mean, maybe as people who are sort of concerned about what church is looking like right now, and some of the ways in which I think church, and again, you pointed it, historically speaking, has been lacking in speaking to certain issues, has been, in our current day, politicized in some unfortunate ways.
The sexual
to some degree,
abuse.
So like, it's almost like I think we're encouraged that people are more easily welcome and want, or more easily interested in coming to church. The problem is once they get there, maybe the problem that I'm worried about is what they end up experiencing.
How are they forming? How are they being formed?
Ends up making them leave and they never want to come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And so praise God, we should be inviting more people to church or church related things, but let's make sure our churches are healthy, are actually centered on Jesus as opposed to other things, because to some degree, well, in large measure, and I think studies have shown this, if you invite them into something that's church, and it's not focused on Jesus, it's all these other things, those other things will taint and corrupt them in ways that can make them harder to ever want to be part of church ever again.
Yeah, and I think that's the question I'm trying to like poke at, is to say, what are we actually inviting them to? I think sometimes we become slaves of our subculture. And so we invite people into this system, this institution that is just different than, a Jesus style of life, right? It's different than like, hey, this is the way that Jesus intended for us to be formed into his image. And yes, we would use the language of making disciples and conforming people into the image of Jesus. But when you watch the behaviors, you're saying, but what about that? But what about that?
Yeah.
But what about that?
There's a lot of stuff going on in the news too with different prominent people.
Right. And so I think there's a degree of, maintaining a bit of humility. And again, non-churchgoers would say they would go if they were asked. It's like, that is great news. I think the other thing I try to think about is, are we inviting them into healthy spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think going back to what I said before, I think it depends on the church. A lot of churches, the answer is no. Just because of some of the spiritual abuse, that's not a healthy space for a lot of people. The sexual abuse, that's definitely not a healthy space for some people. And so
for all people,
for all people, pardon me, for all people. And so, I mean, like, even like, I guess this is a good segue in even to the pastor that's, in Texas.
Robert Morris.
Robert Morris, yeah. Even with him, with I believe it was Gateway Church. Like that whole
Gateway was huge.
Yeah,
huge
so let's,
mega
for
church.
the people,
Yeah.
not everyone's familiar with him.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So just quick, we'll just tag this onto this.
Yeah.
I mean, you might say he was very successful in getting his people to invite people to his church, right?
Yeah.
So Robert Morris, pastor of Gateway Church in Texas, one of the largest churches in the country.
At one
certainly
point,
in
it
Texas.
was. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Massive,
Right? Multiple campuses, etc. He had podcast, radio, television ministries, books. He was part of the Trump's.
There was a plant out here, I think, that was
Right,
an
there was
extension.
a church plant that was
it's no longer named that, so I don't want to name
Yeah.
that church of the association. But there was a church here that was a plant from the Gateway in Texas.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
millions and millions of dollars of revenue coming in. He was on Trump's Evangelical Executive Advisory Board during Trump's first presidency. Trump actually, I didn't know this, Trump visited Gateway Church in 2020 when he was running for office.
Well, he was visiting a lot of churches.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And maybe that was a sign of something, but
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's beside.
so yeah, I mean, you might say a kingmaker, right? If in terms of sort of
Interesting.
evangelical space, right? In 2024, he was accused of molesting a young girl when she was from 12 to 17 years old. He was, I think he was married with kids at this point, right? And he was a traveling sort of evangelist. What's interesting is this wasn't the first time he admitted to having an improper relationship. That he admitted that he had improper relationship. What he said with a young lady. When he came to Gateway, he said, "Yeah, I had an inappropriate sexual relationship, but it was dealt with, etc. I've repented. I've been restored." And everyone said, "Okay, cool." That young lady was a 12-year-old, and
Wow.
she has been sort of
man.
wanting this. I mean, when this happened to her years later, sort of said it to other people, had been sort of engaging Robert Morris to say, "You did this to me. I've had to go through all this therapy," and they kind of pushed her off, etc.
The church did, like the establishment sort of kept.
Exactly. And it's come out since then so not all the elder board knew that the young lady that had an inappropriate sexual relationship was a minor, but at least a few of them did actually know the age of the girl, right? And so that makes it even just
More heinous.
more heinous. And anyway, all this to say is that he got indicted for sexual
Didn't he plead
molestation.
guilty?
He pled guilty.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
not just
part-
an indictment in the sense
That's
of like,
right. He pled
you're
guilty.
being accused and we're going to go through the
Yeah, I
formal
think initially
process.
denied it, but the reality is he had admitted that he had done something in that time period, and you sort of put all the evidence together. I mean, she was clearly the person he was talking about, and in that time period, she was a minor, and so he was indicted. He's now 6 months in county jail, must register as a sex offender, pay restitution. Obviously, he got deposed from Gateway Church. That's the sort of.
And I think he's on
picture.
probation for a period of time too.
Well, he's always going to be a probation.
but 6 months of jail.
Yeah, 6 months county jail.
That's just
Followed by
interesting.
probation, register as a sex offender.
It's interesting given how many there's other people that have done.
Yeah, I wonder if it's
stuff.
because of how long ago it was. Or I don't know all the legal aspects of this. That being said,
Yeah, but just besides the point. But again, when you talk about inviting people, again, 80% would go if they were invited.
Think about how devastating it was to the people of that church
Exactly.
to hear this. This is the guy who they followed, who listened to. I mean, and I've watched enough of him. I mean, he sort of the way he carries himself and holds himself up in that church, like he is their prophet almost. He's the guy, right? What's sad is the people who have been under his ministry, who've trusted him, who've followed him, who've loved him, right? He's been an icon in their lives.
Oh yeah.
To see
yeah.
this, I mean, to see that this is part of his past in a way, and I think even the way that he sort of dismissed it, right? Really, for his entire ministry life. But then on top of that, think about the leaders who knew about this.
That's what makes
So think
it-
about the
yeah.
leaders, because this happened in Oklahoma. So the leaders back in Oklahoma who knew about this, and we went through a restoration period. Like, there's no restoration period when you sexually abuse a minor. You should never, ever again be in ministry. I mean, I'm not saying you can't work again and do other things, but that should be closed off to you. Like, full
You just have to
stop,
turn
right?
it. You have to shut that
If
door.
you are as a pastor, and he was an evangelist, but still, you're holding himself as a religious leader, and you had over a long period of
You just
time.
can't.
And I won't even go into the details of what
Yeah,
he was.
you
what
just
he did
it's
with her.
just
Yeah.
at a certain
Disgusting.
point you got to have the humility to say, "Hey,
But to think that these
I gotta close the
leaders,
door.
sort of even said, "Hey, there's a restoration process that we're going to take you through," and then the other leaders in Gateway, the I don't know how many, but enough that knew what he did and still said, "Yeah, you could still be our pastor." I mean,
Why?
Well, I think you know why? Because of where I began when I began giving his description of him. He was amazingly effective and successful. Like when you're part, and this is part of the sociologists talk about this. You're sort of part of the in group, right? And you realize we got money, we're power, things are growing,
money,
etc. I mean, all that kind of stuff. Like you don't want to. I don't want to stop the gravy train, right? It's sort of. I mean, this is not just true for obviously Christians, right? I mean, I watch NFL teams do this, right? They sign different players and who have, Deshaun Watson, right? Who have all this past, but they're really good and able to accomplish a lot of things. And so you sort of turn a blind eye until they can't do it for you anymore, right? So we're not, this is part of society. However, churches, who claim to follow Jesus, who claim to follow the ethics of Jesus, we should be held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And so it's sad to see
a healthier standard.
Healthier standard, yeah. And so, I mean, bring it all back around. Yeah, I mean, stuff like this says to me, that's great that people are more willing to come into churches. But if it's churches like that, I mean, I guarantee this has been happening. This has happened in many other churches. It happened in Mars Hill, other churches. When sort of a main leader like that falls, people sort of spill out of the church, and many, essentially lose their faith in many respects. And I get it.
And it goes back to what James said. What are they coming to? If they're coming for money, if they're coming for the in group, the success, whatever,
the association,
and if they're not really coming to Jesus,
exactly,
it will eventually all fade away. And so I think that's a good question, James. Like, what are we inviting people to? Hopefully we're inviting people to a encounter with the risen Savior, Jesus Christ. Full stop. Hopefully they understand, they could experience who Jesus is. And then in addition to that, obviously the fellowship of the saints, the community of faith that's in that local body. But if they're just coming for the production, for the money,
the music,
and none of those things are bad.
Not bad
in and of themselves, but if they're not coming to Jesus,
but Jesus always has to be enough, right?
Yeah.
I think it's almost, if I can sort of add to that, it's what's happening a lot now is Jesus plus other stuff.
There's no Jesus at all when you add something.
But we know this.
Galatians 1
these churches will still talk about Jesus, but Jesus is, you've heard me say this, it's the light glaze, right? Over a cake of a lot of other things. That's
of poison.
Poison, that's right. And so when Jesus is just when Jesus is just the sprinkles on top of really what is consumerism, production, et cetera, that, like it won't work.
It's not Jesus.
It's not satisfying. It is actually, it's poison is what you're actually having, right? And eventually kills you. Jesus has to be the main thing. So much so that even if you stripped all the other stuff away, Jesus is enough, right? And so I think we almost have to regularly be asking ourselves and being careful. Are we bringing Jesus to people and making sure it's first Jesus and all the other things are pointing towards Jesus?
Yeah.
Or is it like we're using Jesus to then point to the other things?
And I just want to highlight too, just to, that's a bomb. Can we get a
good distinction. I don't have a bomb yet.
We got to get the bomb.
We got a new board, but we'll get it.
That was
a bomb.
That was good. We're going to replay that back in the joint. I do want to say this too, just because I know I got a lot of creative friends, artists and stuff like that. I want to be very, very clear. In and of themselves, there's nothing inherently wrong with doing things with excellence, spending resources to be able to have a podcast, to be able to invest in the kingdom in creative and innovative ways. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. I just want to be very clear because I can hear my creative friends be like, what, but.
Yeah, it's not even like nothing wrong. It's like there's a lot good about that.
There's a lot good about that. At the same time, what V is saying, what are you coming to? Is it Jesus plus, or is it Jesus alone?
I'm willing to use all those things as a vehicle to get me to Jesus,
exactly,
and to land on Jesus. But if Jesus is just like my stepping stone towards really, all the production, all these other things like that, it's fool's gold. It'll always let you down. It'll always let you down, and you'll be like, "What do I have? I don't have anything anymore." Of course, you don't have anything because it's not eternal, right? Land on what is eternal, what lasts forever. And the Bible is very clear what lasts forever. Yeah. Jesus and the kingdom of God, love, joy, peace, patience, those things last forever.
Amen.
That's where we want to be grounded.
So I do want to speak to this. In most cases, people are going to encounter other people. And so when you talk about non-churchgoers going because they are invited, it's going to be through a relationship of another person. in our disciple making and in our profession of making disciples so that they can be conformed to the image of Jesus. It's the actual real life day to day sort of development of this discipleship to say, hey, that means you're going to encounter real people. And again, when I say people who make mistakes, and it's not necessarily that, it's people who walk with the humility that I am not the source of this attraction, right? My ability to sing, which again, churches will invest in because there is something that happens when you hear music and someone's gifted. There's something that happens, but where the entire culture of that incredible presence and experience all says, hey, and not just from the stage, but when you meet that person outside of the church, when you get an opportunity to see them when they're in the store, whatever, there's that remembrance that, hey, everything. Yeah, I happen to have this unique gift, but somebody else is way better at tech than I am. Somebody's way better at writing than I am. Somebody's way better at teaching and communicating. Like the understanding that we are members of one another, and the invitation into that is that, hey, our goal is that we come together to build one another up. Health becomes the thing. So we understand what happens when you lose someone, or you have a bad breakup, or you make a bad decision. We're not going to speak to you in a way that assumes that we have every answer, or that we figured out the sort of like equation that if you just say this thing or believe the right thing, or I know what verses to say, or the algorithm of the Bible to give you the response that you're looking for. We know, like, hey, we'll walk through that with you. And for the things that, again, need to be dealt with in the way that hey, we're going to do that too, even if it hurts us. And we're going to walk through that hurt, because sometimes when you do have to call out the person who did the thing that shouldn't be around here, it's like, that's going to hit. And again, if you're going to lose a bunch of money, that's okay too. And it's good to be like, hey man, that's going to hurt. And everybody gets the hesitation. The problem is when you don't make the decision anyways, right? Everybody's human. Everybody knows the temptation when there's a bunch of money involved, which will give you resources to do all this ministry and change the world that you want. We all get it. But when a decision has to be made, that's when you're going to choose, do you serve God or do you serve money?
Yeah.
That's
right?
good.
At the point of that decision, and it seems like in some of these cases, they don't make that decision, that leader stays in place, then the culture starts to corrode, and then that's when you get all the abuse.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you mentioned sort of the business of money and worship music and those kind of things. I wonder if it'd be a good time to bring in sort of another topic here.
Oh, interesting.
Bring it in.
What a segue. I see what you did.
You get good on the transitions, Doc.
Okay, on the transition. I see you. Okay.
I've been at this for a while. Speaking of money and worship music, big story that came out. Chandler Moore and Naomi Rain leaving Maverick City.
Yeah.
Maverick City Music. And then I think Chandler Moore, I don't think Naomi's part of this, but he's suing Maverick City for a bunch of money. I think most people are familiar with Maverick City Music, one of the top worship music groups out there.
They're really diverse too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in some ways, I think
Maverick was a movement for
sure.
So,
I mean, they sort of stepped in like just a new way of even doing worship music. I mean, the videos and other things they're promoting, like it was a movement.
And I think, did they blow up during the pandemic? Like,
I think so. I think it was.
I think it was in that 2020. Everybody was shut down and then they started
created
something
that was the in-house studio session.
Yeah, the energy of it, etc. And Chandler Moore is, for those who don't know, I mean, you guys know better than me. I mean, he's like the main voice for them, right? The main.
Him and Naomi was. Those
two of them.
Those two were pretty.
When you think of them, when you think of Chandler Maverick City Music, you think of the two of them, like sort of leading the group, right? So them leaving is huge, and but what's interesting is seeing the sort of details of the lawsuit that the Chandler Moore is that he's basically said, a bunch of money got stolen from me, contracts were done that removed my rights to music, etc. We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, I've been trying to put like my finger on this in terms of like, I mean, you're doing music, people buy it, money's going to come in. That's not bad, right?
No.
But it's just something that feels, what is it that feels off about the fact that like worship music is such a multi-million-dollar business, right? And maybe that's one part of it. But I wrestle with that. I mean, I can't get away from it. It is what it is, right? I mean, I'm not against people being paid for what they do.
It's an industry.
But maybe even that, like, we got to the point where then people are at odds with each other like this, right? That you would think that, like, think about what you're doing. We're praising God together. And yet here is a lawsuit about, like, but no, actually, money was being, if Chandler Moore is right, like, money was stolen from him. The fact that, like, they're in this sort of struggle. The business of church, right? Like, imagine you're part of churches that were, that are associated with Maverick City Music, et cetera, and realizing all this is happening behind the scenes. And now think about the bitterness, the back and forth, all of that. Think of how that affects the music going forward. There's a lot there.
Think of that music. Think about if that music actually helped you follow Jesus.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, whoa,
Yeah. Do you feel bad about listening to that music now? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot there. I know, James, I know you spent more time in the music industry probably than me and Ramon combined. So
it wasn't that much time.
I'd be interested in, because there's a situation with contracts and IP. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on with that. And I feel like there's a just, integral, biblical way to think win-win for everyone. But you hear these stories not only just with this situation, but even like in hip hop and other stuff too, where, and people owning masters, don't own masters, and who puts the money. There's a lot. I would love to hear your take, because it's very up your alleyway. I feel like
it's tough. In most cases, artists just aren't familiar with the economics of any industry. Okay. Artists want to make their art, right? If I sing,
they're true artists. That's what they call them.
They want to sing. Like if I'm an incredible singer, I have a voice, I want to sing. I want freedom to sing, right? And in a lot of cases, business is intended to create that freedom, right? I want to produce enough exchange of value that in return, I get to control my time and do with it what I would please. I think that ultimately that's what everyone wants. Right? I don't want my time controlled by someone else, right? When you think of the most heinous versions of that, in the transatlantic slave trade, it's like your time, your life, what you do with your time is not controlled by you. It's the worst form, right? And so everybody in all these efforts to get what they want, I think somewhere just wants the freedom to do what they want when they want to do it, right? Yeah. That kind of freedom.
Autonomy.
I think when you get into most of these commercial environments, again, where the artist is concerned, they don't have as much experience around the economics as the people, inviting them in the space or pitching the sense of, hey, I think you're talented. We'd love to invest, right? And then when you make an investment in business today, the idea is, can I make a return on that investment? And the idea is, I don't want to just make my money back. I want to make my money back, not just with interest. Like in these venture capital days, I want to make my money back in multiples. So if I give you 100,000, I'm hoping to make maybe 500 to $1 million off of that, right? That's really how it works. And if I can make enough bets, if I can get one or two of them to explode at 10, 50, 100, thing in VC world, then it makes up for all the ones where either I make only a little bit back, or if I lose a bunch, because if I make one that's 1,000x, if I discover Bieber, then that money alone will make up for all the quote unquote fails. The trouble is that you never know the context of the initial conversation and what was promised, what might be delivered, right? You're in a moment.
And that's what he's saying. I just mentioned. So the co-founder said basically, these allegations are false. There are agreements that Chandler made freely and then breached. He's avoiding accountability, passing off responsibility for things that so Chandler Moore is saying that there were some agreements, et cetera, that weren't right, weren't true, funneled through other different things. Money was sort of taken that should have been for me and funneled to them. And they're saying, like, you knew these aren't true. The agreements were clear.
Yeah, and that's always a trouble. And again, you never know, you never have all the context. Like, Lecrae knows these dudes. He knows Naomi. She was on his podcast. And there's stuff going on and, a lot that can't be talked about. But that's always the conversation, I signed a bad deal. And the question becomes, when Christians go into business, do you forget to outdo one another in honor? That's the question I always ask. When we were running Collision, that was one of the things that was always defended is like the deal that could have been signed wasn't the deal that always was what we gave. It was like, no, we didn't recoup in some cases because we didn't know better. We didn't recoup the way typically people would recoup, right? So if I give you $100,000 and the split is 85-15, what it means is that off of your percentage is what you recoup on, not just in general, right? So when you have, if I gave you $100,000 and then we sell some records, what would normally happen is that the 15% that's supposed to go to you goes to recoup the 100,000, which means you've got to take that 15%, 0.15, and how many times does 15 go into 100? Multiply that, and that's the number that you actually have to make up, right? To actually get to that, right? So it multiplies that. So call it 90-10. That means you got to sell $1 million to recoup 100,000. Does that make sense? Because you only get 10%. That's how deals are typically run. I think what was going on with us was like, if it's 85-15, when the records sell, the 85% that was ours would go back to recouping. If we recouped it, we recouped, right? That's not good music business, right? By the numbers, but that's typically, I mean, that's kind of what we did, not knowingly. So when you think like I signed a bad deal, I don't know the deal they signed.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But
He's saying
oftentimes,
he forged his signature. He's saying all sorts of things.
sure. And I don't know about the forging, but even just the idea of how contracts are done, if you're a Christian, especially going into business with other Christians, my question is, are we not supposed to be the people who do business in a way that the world will look at and say, that is stupid, right? Doesn't the wisdom of God look like foolishness? So we'd be the ones that say, hey, I know how things are supposed to work, but what are we trying to do? We're trying to be the kind of presence in the world so that the world gets a better understanding of what God is like, so that through the church, the manifold wisdom of God is made known to the powers and principalities. That's what so if we do that in business or tech or whatever, the idea is that if I'm a Christian and I have all this wealth because I've acquired it, because I was in the right space at the right time, and maybe I was an NVIDIA employee before they blew up big, then they blew up big. And it's like Microsoft in the 90s or 80s or whatever. There are people who made a bunch of money because they were like early employees at Microsoft. You're early employee in NVIDIA, then this AI boom happens. NVIDIA has made so many millionaires. Now you've got capital. Now you go into business and you say, hey, I can invest in some of these things. What kind of contract do you write? Do you write the same kind of contract that the industry would just write? And that's what I always, when these conversations come up, I'm saying, sure. But what kind of contract did you give them?
Yeah.
Did you do the thing that the industry just does?
Just
CCM
because this is
CCM's full of this. You've heard this with Hillsong. Do you just give them the contract, just go like, well, you signed it, you knew it, it was clear, it was right in front of you. You're supposed to have your lawyer sign it.
This is what they do.
Did you do what everybody else does? And what does Jesus say? What more are you doing than they? Isn't that what the Gentiles do?
Yeah.
Isn't there supposed to be something different? That's the thing I try to call people to and go, yo, look, we can't forget who we are first. You ain't no music exec. You ain't no like whatever it is.
Yeah, we're in different.
Outdo one another in honor. And if you say, yo, tip it in their favor where they can make their money back, help them get the money. If you see a contract and you see work for hire in there, don't sign that, right? Yeah. If they don't know that, you shouldn't even write that contract.
Yeah. There's also a language and perpetuity.
Perpetuity, yeah, means forever.
Yeah.
If you see something in perpetuity, be very, very careful of what you're signing. And again, obviously, this is a lesson to an artist who might be listening. But if you are a Christian and you are the one who can give the contract, don't write the contract that way.
It's not to their benefit.
That's accountability.
Don't manipulate.
Again, it's not manipulation. You just you're in the stream. You're just drinking the same water. It's like, yo, you're the one who's supposed to look out.
Yeah, if you're treating them as just another what's the word I'm looking for here? Just another entity, like you're trying to sort of get as much as they can.
Exactly.
Then yeah, that makes sense. But if you're treating them as if they're family, which they are,
come on,
right? Would you do that to your mother? Would you do that to your brother? Would you do that to your sister? You wouldn't. Right. And the Bible says we are brothers and sisters.
But you miss the opportunity when the world operates in a certain way that is just like, me versus you.
Yeah, exactly.
And in reality, if it's Christians saying, let's go into business together, and you know the business of this, it's just like, there's got to be a way to present contracts that just protect everyone.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem. I mean, the whole title of this, the industry of church, the business of church.
That's the problem.
You'll notice that I think a common theme in all of the things we've been talking about is what happens when money comes in and the way it corrupts and changes everything. Like money changes everything. And
ego too.
there's a reason why
at the point when you have to make that decision,
things, right?
Yeah.
You can't serve God or money.
That's right.
And I am struck by how often as churches get more money and attention, other things, but especially as they get more money,
different decisions get made.
Different decisions to make, and you start sort of treating people in a certain way. And again, money is no good.
In order to keep getting the money.
Yeah. And it's sad. I mean, how many times we got to learn this? Like, it's never enough, right? Money you always want to have more, and money will always want to take more. It wants to take all your relationships, it wants to take all your time, wants to take all your attention. You'll keep feeding that monster, and it will never be enough. And in the wake of that will be divorces, will be kids not talking to their parents anymore, will be long time friends who've been working together, making music and other things together, who now aren't talking to each other. All for what?
And think about this.
So I can get another 100,000, 200,000,
and think about this. Remember Paul in 1 Corinthians when he was like, why are y'all taking each other to court in front of the Gentiles?
Yep.
Can you not judge this for yourselves? Do you not know that one day you will judge angels?
Yeah.
And that verse feels like, what are we talking? Like, you even bring it up. I used to bring it up in another preaching collective I was a part of back in the day. And every time I bring it up, it'd be like, I'm talking weird or something, as if it's not in the Bible. 1 Corinthians 6, go look me up.
Other passages too, but yeah, that's one of them.
That will judge angels is like, but that's, Paul is saying like, why would
it's
you
in the Bible.
Sue one another before the Gentiles when you're supposed to have that kind of mind to discern between these things? Meats for the mature, who by way of use know the difference between good and evil. And then we get to this point where it's like, okay, we got to sue because like I'm not being treated right, or I feel this, and then someone's got to be like, no, that's not. Yeah. But the fact that it even comes to this, like, how do we keep getting here when it's like, can we not create something that the world looks at and goes, we never thought you could do business that way?
Yeah.
The culture of that, and again, the pace at which they grew and everything's happening. And obviously people haven't done these things before, but it's like, it's not, people have done these things before. Things have grown this fast before. Yeah. Like nothing is new under the sun. Like, don't forget, your Bible has told you all of this already.
And there's a model for this for us, right? I mean, I think, and things weren't always perfect in early church, so we shouldn't act as if
someone has done it before.
But it is interesting reading Acts. The church is growing, becoming successful. Wealthy people are coming, and the posture there is different. I think we see an example of what it could look like. Just Acts 4, right? Everyone's coming together, and they made sure there wasn't a needy person among them, right? Those who had lands or houses are selling them, bringing it to help those who are in need. Barnabas, right, one of the apostles, ends up, not apostle, but he ends up selling a field that he has, lays the money at the apostles' feet. And I take that to say that I don't think he sold everything that he had. He just said, look, I have extra. I'm not going to say I'm going to take more for myself. I have what I have here. I'm going to take what I have and use it, part of what I have, to help benefit others. And in some cases, people are like, so I'm not going to buy that extra land. I'm not going to buy that extra house. I'm going to use my house. I'm going to use my land to help those who really need it. There's always this sense of like, as God is blessing and giving me more, I tell this to my kids all the time. As you get more, you shouldn't be thinking, I keep it all for myself. Right. Like we should have a category in our mind that says,
That's good.
I don't keep everything I get for myself.
Yeah.
And I don't always have to get as much as I can. I get what I need. And if God gives me more, I always ask God, how do I use this? Sometimes, it's for our family and other things. But many other times, God is going to give you insight and ability to use it to help others. And I think that's a different posture that we have here. And that helps us, that helps us a long ways.
God has blessed you, so therefore you should be a blessing to others.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a good way to kind of land the plane on this particular episode.
A way to have healthy church.
And a way to have healthy church. With that said, too, you started off by saying that somebody they left the church because the church was silent on different issues. So this is a shameless plug for the Unsilent Church podcast that I want you to know that you can like, share, subscribe. And if you also are looking for a church home to come visit, come kick it, come hear about Jesus, come struggle with one another together, Roosevelt Community Church, man.
Yeah, we won't be afraid of your questions.
We're here, man. Come pull up on us. Good episode, fellas. Good episode. I like this, man. I hope this will be encouraging to everyone. With that said, love God, love people. We are out. Peace.